It is truly fascinating how the vast majority of human beings go through their entire lives focusing their efforts on changing the external environment, without even realizing that the true engine driving reality is not found outside, but within themselves. And the most striking part is how many resist, almost automatically, accepting that which seems too simple. 7 days. Just 1 week. That is the time I proposed. When I launched this proposal for the first time, many people told me it wasn't enough, that it was too short a period, insufficient for achieving a meaningful transformation, that in just 7 days, nothing truly important could be changed. But I was certain. I knew it with conviction, because I had seen it with my own eyes. I witnessed individuals break patterns ingrained for decades in just a fraction of time, 1,900 weeks reduced to a single cycle of 7 days. A paradox, no doubt, and I understand. I fully comprehend the contradiction, because everything we've been taught insists that to attain something of true value, it's necessary to go through long, arduous processes filled with effort, dedication, sweat, and even suffering. But the universe doesn't always abide by these rules. The laws of quantum physics operate under a different paradigm. They don't follow the linear model of cause and effect that we were taught. Quantum physics responds, instead, to vibration, to the internal frequency of the observer. And it does so swiftly. Transformations occur the moment you change your internal state. All that is needed is to know how to do it. That's why I designed this protocol, this structured, concrete, direct, and above all, accessible methodology. A practical and realistic path to experience conscious manifestation, not as an esoteric or unreachable concept, but as a tangible experience, something real, verifiable. I am not talking about repeating affirmations in front of a mirror or casting wishes into the universe as if it were a magic lamp or a whimsical mechanism. I'm referring to energetic tuning, to the application of scientific principles, to deliberately collaborating with the quantum field from a state of total awareness. And I can state it without hesitation. Anyone who fully commits to this process for a week rarely returns to their former state. Because once you experience the power of co-creating reality, it becomes impossible to keep believing that everything happens by chance. I always had a deep intuition, a subtle yet persistent perception, that there was something beyond what the senses could perceive. For years, I tried to find words that could explain that silent sensation, as if the universe brushed against my soul through the cracks of the everyday. It wasn't just a hunch, it was a visceral conviction, a certainty deep within my being that everything I longed for already existed, albeit in an energetic form, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Every desire that emerged within me already carried a particular vibration, waiting for my inner energy to give it permission to materialize. It was precisely through this recognition, this revelation, that my reality began to transform. Upon understanding that the universe and I were not separate, that we were not distinct entities but currents of the same essential flow, I stopped chasing goals in desperation. I let go of the need to force the external world to fit my expectations. I discovered that all I needed to do was readjust my inner vibration. And then something extraordinary happened. The quantum field began to respond to my emotional state with surprising, almost mathematical precision. It was enough to feel with clarity, without mental interference or emotional noise, for the invisible to begin manifesting. I began to see myself as an integral part of a living, dynamic, sensitive, and responsive intelligence. Whenever I achieved coherent alignment, when my mind, heart, and body vibrated in the same frequency, signs would appear. A book that opened to the precise page, a conversation overheard seemingly by chance, a name that surfaced at the exact moment, or even vivid dreams containing veiled messages. I learned to pay attention to the subtle, to what doesn't shout. And in the stillness of those small synchronicities, the universe spoke to me. It confirmed, without words, that it was listening. That was when I began to treat my vibration as if it were a sacred language. I understood that true power didn't reside in what I said with my mouth, but in what I felt with my soul. It wasn't enough to think positively or repeat pretty phrases. It was essential to embody the energy of what I wanted to live. And that's why I began to behave as if it were already real. I changed my habits. I transformed my daily routine. I incorporated practices like deep meditation, creative visualization, and the evocation of elevated emotions. I did it all as if it were a choreography with the invisible. And the deeper I delved into this understanding, the more evident it became that I wasn't creating alone. There was something greater, a vast and wise consciousness, co-creating with me, interpreting my frequencies, transforming them into tangible experiences. In that moment, I understood with complete clarity that my thoughts, emotions, and intentions were not random events. They were extremely powerful tools, and behind each of them was an even greater source of power, one I was only beginning to access. It took time for me to accept that I was not a victim of external circumstances. At first, the idea of co-creating my own reality felt arrogant. But the more I delved into the study of consciousness, the more inevitable that conclusion became. My thoughts were not neutral. They had form, vibration, energetic weight. Each one, no matter how small, left its mark on the quantum field. I began to observe how my emotions directly influenced the events unfolding around me. If for days I fed anger, doubt, or frustration, that's what resonated. Not because the world was against me, but because my internal state set the rhythm of the symphony that played around me. Everything functioned as a reflection. Everything was a mirror of my inner world. And I understood that unless I changed my internal reality, nothing could truly change on the outside. I began to see my thoughts as seeds with immense potential. Each idea carried a latent possibility. If I nourished it with intense emotions, it took root. And if that pattern was repeated frequently, it ended up generating an identity, a specific field of attraction. For me, quantum physics ceased to be just a fascinating theory. It became a daily practice, a way of being, of living, of choosing how I feel and how I act at every moment. There was a crucial point where I had to ask myself with complete honesty, what reality am I feeding with my energy? It was not an easy question. It forced me to confront my old habits, my inherited beliefs, the versions of myself that no longer matched who I was destined to be. But in that confrontation, I discovered true freedom. Because if I had the power to co-create all that I did not want, I could also imagine what I was capable of manifesting if I redirected my attention. It was at that moment, with this new awareness, that I assumed a new role in my life. I stopped being the passive character and finally became the conscious scriptwriter of my own story. Emotions, which used to arise as automatic and instinctive responses to life, stopped being mere reflections and became conscious tools in the service of creation. In this vibrant existential symphony, I understood that each emotional nuance, when expressed with precision and authenticity, functions as a powerful key that invites the universe to interact and respond accordingly. However, I discovered there was something even deeper than the simple act of manifesting. Something that demanded total tuning, a full and seamless connection. That was when I perceived, with unbreakable clarity, the immensity of the power that resides in truth. When our energy aligns with what is true in the deepest part of our being, everything takes on a new dimension. It was no longer simply about manifesting desires or projecting intentions, but about fully inhabiting that state of inner truth. That was when I understood that thinking about abundance was useless if my body still vibrated in frequencies of lack. The mind can deceive, embellish, or rationalize, but the body never lies. It feels, perceives, and communicates with total honesty. The universe, that magnificent mirror of our essence, does not respond to what we say, but to what we truly are. There are days when I wake up feeling out of sync, as if a part of me were disconnected or out of tune with the whole. In those moments, I decide to pause. I step away from the noise. I take a deep breath, play music that elevates my emotional vibration, and immerse myself in a carefully chosen meditative practice designed to reconnect me. I do not seek to escape my reality, but to reconnect with the center from which everything emanates. I learned that without the necessary coherence between thought, feeling, and physical action, no intention, no matter how noble, can be sustained over time. The most powerful practice I cultivated was training myself to enter the state of "it already is," that inner place where the desire is lived as if it were already realized. I stopped waiting for external circumstances to align in order to feel fulfilled, and began to reconfigure my inner world from the present. I became the vibrational expression of the future I longed for, even before it manifested in the timeline. And it was astonishing to observe how reality began to reorganize itself, like domino pieces falling with precision, when my internal frequency aligned faithfully with what I wished to experience. This is not a magical act nor simply positive thinking. It is science put into practice, a deep understanding of how energy communicates and shapes matter. Frequency, after all, is a subtle but universal language. And when that frequency is in total harmony with a clear purpose, the universe reacts like a radar, precisely picking up every signal emitted. I lived moments when synchronicity became so exact and meaningful that I could only smile in awe. In those moments of pure alignment, I knew without a doubt that my energy was connected to something immensely greater than any logical reasoning. The real challenge, however, does not lie in reaching that state once, but in maintaining it despite the ever-changing conditions of the environment. The world keeps turning, distractions appear endlessly, and old mental programs, those learned unconscious patterns, try to drag us back to the familiar. But it is precisely there where the practice becomes deeper and more valuable. It is in those moments of trial that true transformation is strengthened. And when I manage to sustain that elevated frequency, even in the midst of chaos, I know I am truly ready to create with deliberate intention. It was this accumulated experience that led me to develop a practical method of inner transformation. Carefully observing the common patterns in the change processes of many people, I felt the call to structure a clear protocol. Thus, a 7-day challenge was born, with 7 simple yet highly effective steps designed to realign the energy of any human being, including myself. Because despite all the experience gained, I still need a structure to support me. The mind, in order not to scatter, requires direction. Without a defined course, it gets lost among random thoughts. That is why I dedicate the first day to laying all the information on the table. To seek absolute clarity, I sit calmly, take a pencil and paper, and write in detail what I truly desire. I leave no room for vagueness. The more precise I am, the more easily my thoughts and emotions can synchronize with that vision. How can I expect to manifest something if I am not even clear on what it is I wish to create? On the second day, I integrate affirmations. But I am not referring to empty phrases repeated like soulless mantras. I am talking about declarations filled with purpose, expressed from the heart. I write them and speak them as if they were already part of my present reality. I am abundance. My life flows guided by a higher purpose. As I say them, I allow the emotion to rise and take over my being. Because authentic emotion is the fuel that transforms words into energetic decrees. The third day I dedicate to visualizing. I do not just imagine scenes, I live them. I mentally walk through that desired scenario, move within it, breathe its atmosphere. The emotion that emerges is so tangible it seems to physically envelop me. By the fourth day, I take action. I'm not seeking grand gestures. A single concrete step is enough. Sending a message, making a decision, moving toward that vision. The universe reacts to intention, but it delights when intention turns into movement. Then comes the fifth day, in which I cultivate gratitude. I connect deeply with everything I already have, which often goes unnoticed. The sixth day is reserved for emotional work. I allow repressed feelings to surface, observe them without judgment, and let them go. Fears, insecurities, attachments. I recognize them, embrace them, and then release them. Finally, the seventh day is a celebration. Even if what I long for hasn't yet taken physical form, I celebrate my new inner vibration, because I know it is the true beginning of all creation. For a long time, I walked this path of self-transformation alone, but it was when I began to share my process with others that I understood the magnitude of the power of conscious networking. Something transforms when multiple minds and hearts synchronize in a shared intention. Collective energy amplifies the quantum field, and within that expanded field, change happens more quickly, deeply, and authentically. In the immersions I facilitate, I witness this constantly. Individuals who had never seen each other before, in just a few days, begin to vibrate in harmony as if they shared the same life story. Tears, laughter, spontaneous healing processes arise. This isn't mysticism, it's quantum physics in real time. When several consciousnesses unite with a higher purpose, the field responds on a higher frequency. For this reason, I coined the concept of collective coherence. It's not about depending on others to heal or evolve, but rather understanding that we are part of a greater system, an interconnected energetic organism. When one person rises, they inspire others to rise too. And when many awaken together, the entire world begins to resonate at a new frequency, brighter, more conscious, and profoundly transformative. I witnessed how it happened. I saw it with my own eyes, and I continue to see it today. It was in that moment that I felt the deep urge to inspire the creation of movements within the digital space. Hashtags emerged, communities formed, virtual gatherings were born. All of this with a clear and powerful intention: to generate a collective resonance among people who may never see each other face to face, but who are already connected through an energetic bond beyond the physical. Energetic manifestation represents something far deeper than a mere symbolic act. It is a living signal, a beacon that reminds us that when we unite from the heart and intention, we are capable of co-creating a new version of the world, a new vibrational reality. However, the true turning point, the moment where everything truly changes, happens when this experience is no longer sporadic. When it ceases to be an isolated event, limited to a spiritual retreat, a temporary challenge, or a group dynamic, and begins to integrate gently into the constant flow of everyday life. Because it is precisely there, in the day-to-day, in the seemingly insignificant details, in the simplest decisions, in the stillness of the daily routine, where a different way of inhabiting the world is built. For me, this transformation was never something isolated or momentary. What truly generates deep and lasting change is when the knowledge we acquire becomes a constant practice, and that practice, over time, solidifies as a natural state of being. This isn't about adopting a new behavior for a week and then going back to old patterns. It's about allowing this new way of living to become so familiar, so organic, that it ends up becoming our new standard, our normal. A way of existence where the extraordinary no longer seems exceptional and begins to be the usual. Over time, I understood that true transformations didn't only happen during deep meditations or within a reserved introspective space. The most authentic change manifested in silent sunrises, in conversations that challenged my old beliefs, in the small choices I made almost without realizing it. In those subtle moments, the old mental programming tried to resurface, trying to drag me back to the previous frequency. And it was precisely there, in those key instants, that I had to choose. Do I stay in the old vibration or do I decide to remain in the new one? That's when everything transformed. That was the moment the game completely changed. It stopped being something I occasionally did, and I began to embody a new version of myself. Being conscious was no longer an action I took, but an integral part of my identity. For this new lifestyle to flourish, it was necessary to let go of limiting beliefs that tied me to the past. I stood before the mirror, looked at myself honestly, and recognized that the image reflected back wasn't who I truly was. It was an imposed story, an inherited narrative built on other people's expectations. And so, I chose to replace that story. I didn't do it only through verbal affirmations or motivational phrases. I backed it with concrete actions. I stopped hiding behind reduced versions of myself. I began to choose different environments, spaces that nurtured my growth. I started consuming content that elevated my consciousness, that inspired me to be better. I decisively distanced myself from models and standards that didn't reflect the being I wanted to become. That's how life began to respond to me. It wasn't an automatic process or a straight path without stumbles, but every time I fell, I found the strength to get back up. That constant repetition, that firm commitment to myself, was sculpting a new identity. Today, I no longer need to constantly remind myself how to maintain my elevated frequency. It has become my new point of balance, my natural state. And when I disconnect, I notice it almost immediately. Then I stop, observe myself, make the necessary adjustments, recalibrate my energy, and move forward. That, to me, is living in coherence. It is being aligned with the universal energetic field, with inner purpose, with the most authentic version of myself, the one that already exists and only needs to be chosen in every moment. And the most wonderful thing about all of this is that the more I live this way, the more I discover how much there still is to explore, to experience, to manifest. Because this path has no end point. Each stage of expansion opens the door to a deeper dimension. Even after years of practice and commitment, I continue to be amazed by the vastness of the creative intelligence that dwells within us. So, if all this potential is already available to you, what is truly stopping you from embracing it right now? How many times have you postponed change because you believed you needed more time, more signs, more proof? What would happen if you decided to commit, just for 7 days, to a new way of living? What if you discovered that what you thought was impossible only seemed that way because you never dared to look to the other side? The knowledge is already accessible. The structure is in place. The path has been walked by thousands of people who chose to commit to real transformation. But none of that will have a true impact if you don't live it for yourself. Because authentic transformation isn't learned only through words. It is experienced in the body, felt in the soul, imprinted on the skin. So tell me, are you going to let this video be just a fleeting spark of inspiration that fades away? Or are you going to take the first step and let your actions speak for you? Leave a comment saying, "Today begins the first day of my new life."